So welcome to the next episode of the Tree Lady Talks. Today Sharon is speaking to John Ryan, the Arboricultural Manager at the London Borough of Islington. And any chewing you can hear in the background is a 35 kilogram golden retriever. Notwithstanding that, Sharon, what does John do? Tell us.
Well, John is the Arboricultural Manager and he looks after a really great team of tree officers. And I really wanted to talk to John because he can give us a real insight into what it's like being a tree officer, because that too is a great career. And also it follows on so neatly from last week where we talked to John Parker and he was talking about green equity. And that's really looking at where a tree's growing and does that match where people need them.
I think it's really interesting what John said about trees necessarily green spaces not being in, shall we say, poorer areas of the country. They seem to be in wealthy areas. There's more green space in wealthy areas. I know John's going to talk about that a bit, isn't he?
Yes, and how to redress that balance. So without further ado, let's have a good chat with John Ryan.
You better go and get a marrow then in that
I know we've got so many marrows. Does anybody want one? Hello, my name is Sharon Durden-Hollenby and you're listening to Tree Lady Talks. All views expressed by me or the interviewee are our own, and all production and music is by Noel Durden-Hollenby. Hi John, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview for our podcast Tree Lady Talks. For those of you who don't know, John is the Arboricultural Manager for the London Borough of Islington. So how did you get involved with trees?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me, Sharon. It's lovely to be here. Do you remember the '87 storm? You're too young.
Why? No, of course I'm not too young. I was a student at the time and I slept through it. And
Likewise. I slept through the whole thing, but shortly after the aftermath, I found myself, I don't know, I must be about 18. And I was between jobs. I'd done really well at school, surprisingly, and then flunked sixth form. And my brother grabbed hold of me, and I think he was probably told to by my parents, give him a good talking to. And he sort of took me out and said, well, what are you going to do with your life? Come on, you're 18 now, time to get a career. I didn't have a clue. He said, well, what do you want to do? I want to work outdoors. I want to have fun. I want something exciting. And he coincidentally had a friend who'd been to Capel Manor on a tree surgery course. I didn't even know tree surgery was an option. Obviously, I brought up in the countryside, always been around trees, love woodlands, but didn't ever consider it as a career choice. So I applied for Merest Wood, but they wouldn't let you in those days unless you had 2 years apprenticeship. So I went away, started off as a groundsman, ended up as a tree surgeon, went up to Frankfurt, spent a couple of years in Germany, spent a couple of doing street trees, spent a couple of years in Portugal, just outside Lisbon, doing woodland management.
Yeah.
Went to the Bahamas, moving palm trees, and then ended up in London for about a dozen years, working for a big company called Tree Care.
Yeah.
As a tree surgeon, loved that. Ended up helping manage there. So I had to come off the tools. My body was broken by that point. You know, your wrists go, then your fingers go, and then your elbow goes, your back goes, your knee goes, and you suddenly realise you can't climb anymore. So I went back to Capel Manor to get my tech cert this time. I got my ND at Merest Wood, and then became a tree officer.
Oh.
The rest is history. And then I must have met you shortly afterwards, Sharon.
Yes, that's right, because you were the tree officer at the London Borough of Islington. I really hope there'll be some people listening today that actually don't know what a tree officer really is.
Well, I'm very lucky. As the Arboricultural Manager, I look after a team of 8 people who manage all the publicly owned trees in Islington. And so that's about 40,000 trees. And we inspect those trees on a 3-year cycle and attribute works to the ones that need works. And then we monitor those works and deal with all inquiries. We also look at the planning aspect as well. There's 2 different types of arboricultural officer or tree officer. You've got the public realm officers who look after the housing, highways and parks trees predominantly. And then you've got the planning officers who deal with works applications and notifications to protected trees and also to planning applications and defending trees on development sites and getting mitigation for tree loss on development sites.
That's a huge body of work. And, you know, there's so many weird myths around tree preservation orders and trees in conservation areas. When I was a tree officer, people would say, well, all oaks are protected, aren't they? And you can't touch these trees. But just debunk some of those myths for us. What does it really mean?
I really wish we had as much power and authority as the general public would like us to have, but unfortunately we don't. There are two levels of tree protection, and the first one is a conservation area. So if you're living in a conservation area, that's a blanket protection of the historic structure, and it includes the trees as well, not the shrubs, but the trees as well, because the trees provide valuable amenity to the green and verdant nature of the conservation area. So if you want to carry out any works in a conservation area, you have to give the council 6 weeks notice, and that gives the tree officer time to work out whether the tree works are appropriate or whether the tree should be protected, to protect them from inappropriate works or removal. And if they wanted to protect the trees or stop works from a notification, they would impose a tree preservation order, which is the highest level of tree protection you can afford to a tree in the UK. With a tree preservation order, you can carry out reasonable works, but you have to put in an application, and the tree officer will determine whether that application is appropriate or not, and maybe help advise the tree surgeon or the tree owner on appropriate works as well.
Because I think a lot of people think that members of the public think the trees need pruning.
Trees don't like being pruned. I think they've evolved over millions and millions of years, storm damage and grazing, so they can tolerate pruning, but they don't. I don't think they would appreciate it too much. I mean, there are some works that do help. Trees will often outgrow their own structural capacity sometimes, so you can help trees and prolong them. And also, you've got to reduce the conflicts in an urban environment. And there's a lot of pruning works that you can undertake to reduce those conflicts, cutting back from buildings, allowing people through past, and maybe helping a bit with light and encroachment. But you're right, trees don't necessarily need pruning. And as a tree surgeon turned tree officer, I'm poacher turned gamekeeper. So yes, tree surgeons can be salesmen for tree work. Not all of them. Some of them are very good, very impartial. In fact, most of them nowadays.
Yeah, there's some absolutely brilliant tree surgeons around. Yeah. Part of the approved contractor scheme with the Arboricultural Association. So
that's right.
Excellent work being carried out there. And you're quite right. It's better to prune an urban tree and keep it than to fell it because it's a little bit too big for the space. I wonder, during the lockdown that we've just been through, hopefully we won't go through again, people have been at home more, they may have been furloughed and looking at their garden and thinking, oh, Christ, that tree is so big, I'm going to get onto the council, it needs a haircut.
We've had a big surge in applications the last few months, and that unfortunately has coincided with a decrease in the quality of those applications. Often people are putting in the applications and notifications without consulting a tree surgeon, so they're not getting specific advice on the wording of the pruning or what they want to do. So we've had an increase in applications, decrease in the quality of the applications, but also at the same time a decrease in the number of site visits we can actually do. Wow. Usually, if we were to, in order to check whether works are appropriate, you'd go out and have a look at the tree if you can, if the information supplied isn't sufficient for you to do a desktop survey. So yes, it's been busy. And I think I'm not alone in saying that the public sympathy for COVID-related delays is in the wane. People are much less tolerant if you say that you can't come out and have a look at their tree because of COVID restrictions than they were perhaps 3 or 4 months ago.
Well, I know everybody's sort of trying to get back to normal now, but I mean, is there a role as a tree officer to do some public education on how trees should be managed? Or have you got so many roles to fulfill that it's just overwhelming?
No, absolutely. And that was the best part of the job when I was a planning tree officer. I think actually going to visit people and talk to them about their trees, I used to love that. It's difficult in local authority at the moment. We've had 10 years of austerity, and I don't think people outside of local government understand how much has been pared back. I mean, I'm extremely fortunate in Islington to have a team as large as I do, and that's largely because we do income generation as well. We do a lot of work for tree management for other local authorities, charities, and private landowners, so that bulks us up.
So as a local authority, you actually deliver services to other local authorities as well, so that you get some money in. But you know what I've noticed in the last 10 years as a consultant and an ex-tree officer is how many local authorities either don't replace a tree officer when they leave or retire, or actually make them redundant and think that they can go ahead without these in-house services. And I think that's really dangerous. It's dangerous for protected trees, but also for the really important trees and the planning process as well.
I completely agree. Having a good tree officer, and I think we've said this before, it brings up other professions. You bounce off each other. So a good tree officer will bring the best out of a good consultant, and a good consultant will bring the best out of a good tree officer. Same with the tree surgeons. There is a symbiosis between all of us that we can improve not only our professions, but also the tree stocks we're working in. I think it's become part of the disparity between different local authorities is quite shocking. And you're right. I really don't envy my colleagues who are working out on their own, perhaps either individually in a public realm as a tree officer or individually as a planning officer on their own in the planning department for a whole council. There is so much to work to do as a tree officer. It's almost impossible to improve the processes and the situation you're in when you're just inundated with work, and getting the funding to make sure that tree management is taken seriously by local authorities is definitely a priority to safeguard UK trees.
Yes, absolutely. So two things have come out of that, really. One is perhaps not where you're working, but a sense of loneliness for some tree officers who are the sole expert in their local authority. But fortunately, there are some fantastic organisations. We've got the Association of Tree Officers, which is the national body. And where you are, you've got the London Tree Officers Association, which I believe you're involved in.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to be on the executive committee for the LTOA. We've also got our colleagues in the Municipal Tree Officers Association as well up in the Midlands.
Yeah.
But there's lots of little groups all around the country, and ATO's trying to help bring those together, which is great.
Yeah.
But with the London Tree Officers Association, you're absolutely right. And there is a wealth of knowledge and expertise. You find yourself trying to reinvent the wheel, and just a quick exchange on a forum or talking to colleagues, you can quickly find out who's made the wheel and the turbocharger better than you have, and get things moving pretty quickly.
I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. In fact, their websites are all really interesting to the members of the public as well, aren't they? Information like dog damage on trees, for example. I've never even heard of that until I started doing that work. So it gives you that emotional backup as well as technical backup.
Excellent working parties as well. So they're quite quick to adapt now, especially with the LTOA now. If you have an interest or there's an issue or something's coming to a head, you can set up a working party. And so there's a number of working parties, which is smaller groups, subgroups of tree officers working to find solutions for different issues. They've been really successful in the past.
We're going to hear about that at the end of the year with the LTOA on this podcast. The other point you made, which I really chimes with me, is the fact that there is a symbiotic relationship, or there should be, between the tree officer and the consultant, working together, elevating each other, dare I say, to increasingly explore different ways of making the treescape better, be it through the consultant's approach with dealing with the development side with their clients, together with the strong policies that you might form as a local authority. So that's when it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't work so well for either party reason, maybe lack of resources. But one of the reasons that we're talking about this today is because, as I say, there might be somebody listening who doesn't know what a tree officer is. But it's exciting also because there's going to be apprenticeship schemes, isn't there?
One of the big problems with tree officership, I believe, is the fact that there's no direct, clear career route to becoming a tree officer. People don't know it's there for a start. They don't know tree officers exist. But also there's not a great deal of training, specific training to do for that. So I've got colleagues who are working on providing courses to become tree officers, but also apprenticeships, not only at the beginning to start an introductory level apprenticeship, but also an apprenticeship, say, to come off the tools. So you might have a qualification in tree work as a tree surgery operative, and then want to move into an office. There's an apprenticeship there. And then there's another apprenticeship, hopefully, from moving from arboricultural or tree officer into arboricultural manager, so a level 6 apprenticeship. So getting those apprenticeships on board, getting a career route, getting a defined profession together will help, because at the moment, it's really actually quite hard to find tree officers. If you've got a job open, and I've said this before, Sharon, but I don't understand why, with the glory, the power, the money involved, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't want to be a tree officer.
Well, actually, I don't understand it either, because I mean, it's a great career, and I did it myself for 13 years, but people just don't know it's there. I think apprenticeships are going to be really, really helpful in that way. You're listening to Tree Lady Talks with John Ryan, the Arboricultural Manager of the London Borough of Islington, UK. Tell us a little bit about your borough. So you're Islington.
Well, Islington, I've been there for a while now. It's a very small borough. It's only about 3 miles by 4, 250,000 people, very densely populated, the smallest amount of green urban space in any of the central London boroughs. A high level of development. We have some issues. There's quite a high level of social deprivation, very closely intermingled with some very affluent areas in Islington. We have about 40,000 trees that we manage there. Most of them are on housing land or highways, not so many in parks. And we've got a canopy cover of 25%. If you look down on Islington, 25% of Islington is covered by tree cover, which is amazing.
So how did you find that out?
Well, we commissioned a survey. We kind of knew what it was. We thought it was about 23% just from, there was the London Eye Tree survey before, but we commissioned Treeconomics. I was a big fan of the work that Kenton and his team are doing with Eye Tree. And we asked them to do a canopy cover survey. And that largely because we were being set targets. And I didn't want to be set targets to improve canopy cover without knowing exactly what we had. And where, also, I just want to know where our trees are.
Oh, of course.
Just professional curiosity. Where are they? It's been a very useful tool to quantify it slightly. London is around 21%. Is that an average canopy cover? And I think the urban UK canopy cover is around 17.5. So we're doing really well. Considering I've got a medieval street layout in the south of the borough, which isn't really very good for planting trees in. But on the back of that as well, talking about where we've got our trees and what we're trying to find out. We're quite data rich in Islington. We have a database called Easy Tree, and because we manage our trees by surveying them every 3 years, we've got so much different data, raw data on our trees, the species, the sizes, the canopy covers, the circumferences, everything, proximity to buildings, all sorts. So we wanted a way to use this information, to put this information into a format that would be useful for us, and also to find out the values of those trees. Because to protect my budgets, if I know how hard those trees are working, I can go back to the client department, housing, highways or parks, and go, well, look, your trees are providing X amount of value in pollution interception, stormwater interception, carbon sequestration, let alone the amenity value or the caveat value or the replacement value of those trees. So once they know what their asset is, they can. It's much easier for somebody who doesn't like trees to understand the management of trees if they can see it as a financial valuation against a cost.
Given a monetary value under the caveat. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, they can go to the London Tree Officers Association website and look at that. And giving those incredibly important values about how hard our trees are working for us in making the air purer, making everything cooler. I mean, just to say, we're recording this in over 30 degrees centigrade. You know, climate change is now.
I'm melting.
So am I. I've actually had a wet tea towel on my head. I feel like I'm in a children's nativity. So you've got all these values, and I know that you've broken them down into wards, and that this information is publicly available, isn't it?
That's right. We'll put a link. I'll give you a link to put onto your website. But what we really needed to do was break it down into where the trees are, where the geographical locations are, just not in the borough, but also broken down into ward basis, but then into ownership as well. So who owns what and where those are. And then we can really start justifying our existence and say, the environmental benefits from Islington's trees are around £700,000 a year, which for me is great because my tree surgery budget's about £600,000 a year.
Yeah.
So instantly I can show that, yes, you're paying out a lot of money for tree surgery, but the benefits are greater than the cost of the tree work. You and I inherently know that trees are great and lovely and they're brilliant. That's fine for people like us who love trees and are passionate about trees, but it's those who aren't we have to convince.
Yes.
You're right. Yeah, you mentioned I don't have a tree planting budget at the moment. And this again will allow me to tap into different budgets, not just grants, but also I want to tap into the health budget. I
Yeah.
mean, if I can prove that trees are beneficial for health, they're intercepting pollution, they can do all these things, then surely I should be able to tap into different streams of revenue for tree planting. And ultimately, that's what we want to do.
And so what's so interesting about the iTree project is you're able to have the map layer showing where the trees are and overlay that with areas of social inequity, because we talked about green equity on this podcast with John Parker, and that's also what you're actually putting into action now. What did you find?
Well, we got Kenton and Tree Economics to put together a quick planting strategy based on the detail that we'd already had. So we got the areas of low canopy cover, cross-referenced them with areas of high social deprivation, and then again with the areas within 40 metres of roads for pollution interception by trees. Took out the buildings and the hard surfaces and the existing trees, and that left us with a heat map of where it would be most beneficial to plant trees. It was a broad brush. It wasn't, you couldn't use it to identify individual sites, but a very important tool for me to be able to go to the ward councillors, to go to different residents and go, look, this is where you need to plant trees for the greatest benefit. If you give me money for tree planting, I can show you that I am going to target where those trees will be best planted. We found a lot between the busy highways and estates. I don't think it's just going to be trees, though. I think we're going to be looking at where we can't get trees, then we want to get hedges, and where we can't get hedges, then we want green walls.
Yes.
I think we're going to move into getting more joined up with green infrastructure, and hopefully, I want to see more hedges in London. I know they're a nightmare to maintain, but especially next to roads, I think that low level, and I mean proximity to the source of pollution as well, interception is going to be more and more important.
I mean, it's amazing. A hawthorn hedge, 1 metre high, can really act like a bit of a sponge.
Pushes stuff up and away as well, which is really...
No, that's really great. So you're going to be tackling that. And we've talked about social disparity. How are the people going to get involved with this, John?
Well, community engagement has suffered. I'm very lucky. I have a team. Having a team, we sometimes struggle with community engagement because you try and get everything else right. And over the last 10 years of austerity, everything's been pared away within local authority. And we don't have a great deal of money left over for public engagement. And I think that's got to change. And something we're doing a big push on at the moment is trying to re-engage with residents. We seem to have lost the trust. And I think it's largely because people are a lot more aware and a lot more passionate about environmental issues and climate issues. And there's been some very high-profile problems with street trees, such as Sheffield. And most people who care about trees often don't feel enabled to do much about it. And then when they see a tree being pruned or being removed, for whatever reason, it could be a very valid reason, they instantly leap to attack the body that's undertaking those works. So we need to engage with people to show that tree management can be done properly, give them the information that we have in a format that they can use and understand, to show that, yes, we are managing and we do care passionately about trees. We're not here for the money, the glory, or the power. We do care about the trees, and that's why we do it. So I think we're going to try and do some more stuff in Islington. We want to try and get the tree warden scheme up and running again. So we've got people who are passionate about trees working with us. We want to do a webinar in Islington in November for the local residents, letting them know what we do and how we're doing it, and try and gain support. And that will lead on, hopefully, to people having a greater sense of ownership for the public trees as well. We want people to be able to help us water the trees, help us maintain them, contact us when they've got found spots they think could be planted.
Brilliant.
All these things, but it does take funding to be able to do this, because if you, as we said before, if you're a lone tree officer working on your own with your head in the office somewhere, not having the funding to manage the trees that you've got, then making time for that is very, very difficult.
It is really difficult, but I think really worthwhile. And I've noticed walking around in London doing my work that a lot of local residents are getting more involved with their green spaces, such as planting up old tree pits. And there's been some movements here and in America, actually, where in city areas people are growing food in their spaces. What are your thoughts on, say, planting fruit trees?
Yeah, I think we're planting it's only a small orchard, 12 trees on one of our estates this year. I love the idea of people getting more involved with trees in general. So fruit trees are a great way of getting residents actively engaged. There's a lot of maintenance that goes on. I don't want to. As an arboricultural manager, I am the focus of a lot of complaints about trees, and we've had fruit trees on highways before. They take a lot of management, because if you haven't got residents actively supporting and engaging and helping manage and maintain those fruit trees, then they can get away from you. Fruit fall and seasonal nuisance of wasps and other insects. We get a lot of complaints about anyway. So once you've got that support, why not? Let's get it done. Yeah. And as somebody who does, I'm looking at the cider press next week. I'm going to be making my own cider. I think it's a great idea. Apple trees out there.
People are sort of eating differently now because of coronavirus, aren't they? Picking their own food, growing their own food if they're on a sort of window box scenario. But no, that's really good. Now, I know Islington fairly well myself, and it's under huge pressure for developments, both local authority, much needed housing, and private developments. And you haven't got a lot of open space, and your highways are quite full of trees, as demonstrated by your canopy cover, which you are going to increase. Where are these trees going to be planted?
Well, it's a struggle. We're a victim of my predecessor's success a bit, really. Having a 25% canopy cover, we've got, I think I mentioned, we've got the smallest amounts of public open green space and parks in any central London borough. So our parks, as much as I might like them to be woodlands and for everyone to be forest bathing in Highbury Fields, the parks managers and the public generally, they need open space as well.
Yeah, no, you too.
So I've got no place to plant anymore in parks in Islington. Highways, again, is quite saturated. All the easy sites are done. We've got quite a few constraints in Islington. We've got a medieval road layout in the south of the borough, which really doesn't predispose itself to street tree planting. Massive amount of services. We've also got subsidence. We're over half the borough is on quite shallow clay. So we have constraints. It's getting more expensive to plant trees than it was, say, 10 years ago, just because we're having to do more preparation.
Because of the underground services, they're a major problem. But what we do have now, John, which we didn't have 10 years ago, is we've got a much wider range of planting techniques, haven't we?
One of the best places to plant, I think, in Islington is on the highways and to lose a car park space.
Yeah.
And we've got the techniques now to excavate road, build up soil inside there with modular systems and get large trees in. And that way you're permanently removing a car from the highway and the pollution that brings, but also actively intercepting pollution, stormwater interception, all the benefits that large canopy trees. The council has to make a decision about how much revenue they're losing from a car park space.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing we're looking at. Also, and this is one of my big pets, is I want trees on buildings, It's got to be done, Sharon. We've got a very good, strong policy on green roofs and extensive green roofs, and that's being amended to include water attenuation. So once you've got green roof with water attenuation underneath it on a flat roof, and you've designed in the overburden that could so easily just be swapped out for soil, and you've got trees on buildings, it can be done. It's being done elsewhere. I really do think that if we're going to hit our targets, I'm very hopeful. We managed to get it into the local plan draft, and hopefully it makes it all the way through, that developers now have to consider trees on buildings. In 5-10 years' time, if we get them to go, developers have to prove that they can't have trees on buildings. And then 10 years after that, it'll be developers have to have trees on buildings. It's pushing the onus onto developers to have to pay for these things. But I can't see where else the money's going to come from, Sharon.
Yeah, I think also it's going to make our cities so much more bearable. The temperatures are going to rise. We've got to have more trees to give us more shade and put them on buildings.
Absolutely.
On balconies. I mean, there's that famous building in Italy.
Bosco Verticale,
that's got to be the way forward.
It's about building resilience, isn't it? You've got to build resilience. And one of the things the inventory came out with, one of the good facts that surprised me was that we've got 262 different tree species in Islington on public land. And I've inherited a great palette of trees in response largely to climate change. I mean, central London's 2 degrees warmer than areas outside London already. I can't imagine what it's like today. It's going to be absolutely scorching. So we've got to build that resilience in. And you're right. I think the only way to do that is to get green walls, get the trees in, get the canopy cover up, get the suds working, get water attenuation where you've had water capturing stormwater. It's all got to link up.
262 species of trees is brilliant because we need that diversity. We need to look at different species of plants that we wouldn't ordinarily have thought of that can tolerate hotter conditions. That's great. So what's your dream scenario?
Oh, air conditioning and a cold beer.
Yeah, we need that today.
I think that the management of trees has to have a clearer career route. For tree officers, we need a clearer career route and ensure that tree officership and tree management for local authorities is properly funded. And I think that's the cornerstone of having appropriate tree management in your local authority and having a healthy and resilient tree stock. A tree stock that's going to be resilient to climate change, to future incoming pests and diseases. We really do need to do that. And the way we're going to do that, I think, is to make it more inclusive. We need to appeal as a profession to a broader range of people. We need to get it out there that it's a great profession to be in. If you love trees, it's a really good place to be.
Yeah, you really can feel that you can make a difference to tree numbers, tree health, tree education. It's an absolutely great career, and I just want to thank you so much, John, for your time on this very hot day. I'm just sharing your story and your aspirations for Islington. More trees, different locations. Let's put them on buildings. Let's have lots of different species, and so look forward to the emerging apprenticeship scheme. And the link to your canopy cover assessment will be on the Sharon Hosegood Associates website on the Tree Lady Talks tab.
I'll add a link. There's a little link as well to a website, the micro site that had all the values as well, which is quite interesting from Tree Economics Difference. I'll put that up.
Fabulous. All right, take care. Go and enjoy your afternoon.
You too. Take care. Thank you, Sharon.
Bye.
Well, that was really interesting what John was saying about how difficult it is to find tree officers because no one knows where to look for the jobs. I mean, have you experienced that in employing people over the years?
Well, generally, I know that it's hard to find tree officers and it's hard to get tree consultants as well. There's a real shortage out there.
But what he was saying about heat mapping and that's where we can sort of design the tree cover for certain places, I think that's a fascinating thing, isn't it?
Well, I think the job's evolving. I mean, they're the nuts and bolts of what they do, but with all the new technology, things are really moving forward, and to address green equity, it's a really exciting development in the future of tree officers.
And he's really passionate, John. I really like the way that he puts it across. He's getting into his subject a lot, and so good luck to him. I hope he does shake it up at Islington. So where are we going next week?
Well, we're going to leave the hot city streets and go into the cool of the forest.
Exciting,
yeah.
Exciting. What are we going outside of the UK?
We are. We're going to meet Lacey Rose from Canada and Mima Letts from the UK.
Mima and Lacey?
That's right.
That gives me an idea. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Well, these two young ladies have a great career in forestry, so we're going to learn a little bit about sustainable forest practice. But we're also going to hear about how they've been pioneering to get greater diversity in the industry. Lacey's been involved with a movement called Women in Wood, and Mima has been involved with Tree Sparks, a social enterprise. Can't wait to have this double act with them, so listen out.